Bava Kamma daf kuf yud veiz. So the Gemara is going to bring another version of a Maimer of Bava Kamma. On our last Amud, we saw that Bava Kamma commented on our Mishnah where we said that somebody who steals and leaves it as Yerush to his children, the children don't have to pay for it. And Bava Kamma said the reason is because an inheritor is like a purchaser. Since they bought it, they were kind of b'yish and shini rishus. And the Gemara says, Bava Kamma, according to this version, wasn't talking about a Mishnah, he was talking about a different brisa, which we had earlier in Daf Tzadi Daled, that says if the father lent money and collected ribis, and then he leaves it as Yerusha to his children, even though they know that it's ribis money, they don't have to return it. Ordinarily, a person has to return ribis money. Since they inherited it, they don't have to return it. On that, Bava Kamma comments, because an inheritor is like a purchaser. Since they bought it, it's yish and shini rishus, and therefore they are kleinid, they don't have to give it back. Rava says a different explanation of that brisa. It's not because of rishus yerush ki rishus lekech. It's not because they're like they bought it. It's because the Torah makes a gzeiras hakasav that only the one who collected the ribis has to return it, not his inheritors. The Torah says al tikach meitoi neshach v'sarbis. You should not collect ribis, and if you do, the implication is that you should return it. In order that it shouldn't stay with you, then you shouldn't violate the isser of taking ribis. And therefore it's only that person who has it, b'teras ribis, who has to return it. The children who it's not ribis, they don't need to return it. Now, so here you have the two versions of Bava Kamma. Says the Gemara, the one who said it on our Mishnah would not say it on this brisa, because here you have a different explanation. You have Rava's explanation. The one who learned it on this brisa, where Bava Kamma is saying it and not going with Rava's explanation, would certainly say it on our Mishnah where there's no other explanation. Now the Gemara brings a number of brisas that say related halachas to the halacha which we've seen in our Mishnah of that somebody who steals something and then he dies and leaves it as Yerush to his children, the children don't have to pay it back. So first brisa, the Gemara says if somebody who steals and feeds it to his children, they don't have to pay it. If he left it them as a Yerusha, so if they're adults, Gedalim, they are chayav to pay it back. If they're Ketanim, children, they don't need to pay it back. Okay, so far so good. If the Gedalim, if the adult children, however, say we don't know the calculations that a father had, then they don't need to pay it back. So how does that make sense? Because they don't know they know that it's stolen property, and they don't know if there are calculations backing it up. That's a reason for them not to pay it back. How does it make any sense? They don't know what happened, so ain't something makes them leivadai. Bari b'shema. So the Gemara says, no, the pshat is not like it sounds. Rav explains we are referring to where the adult children said, we know that a father had calculations, and we know that you don't have anything left that he owes you. So they're not saying we don't know, saying we do know, then they don't need to pay it back as inheritors. Now, next brisa says, somebody who steals and feeds it to his children, they are part of having to pay back, leaves them as a Yerusha, and they've used it up. So now it's gone, it's not there. And then, whether they're adults or children, they need to pay it back. They have to return it. And that the Gemara asks, how could children be obligated to return something? There's no court case against children. Children, even if they're mazik something straight up, they don't need to pay. So Papa says, if to change the understanding here a little bit, what it really means to say is that if he left it to them as Yerusha and they did not consume it, then they have to pay it back. So if they consumed it, they don't have to pay it back because it's gone. If they didn't consume it, it's still around, so this is stolen property that still exists and belongs to the original owner and has to be returned. Now the Gemara brings a statement of Rava that's three parts. First halacha, second halacha, and then a third one, which is going back on either the first or the second, and we're not sure which one, and therefore not sure if it agrees or disagrees with a halacha Rav Papa said. So the three halachas are as follows. Halacha number one, if a father leaves a borrowed cow to his children, they can continue using it until the term of borrowing is over, and if something happens to it, they don't have to pay for any eintzin, because they never accepted by themselves to take care of this cow. Now, that's halacha number one. Halacha number two, if they thought it belonged to the father and they shachted it and they ate it, then they have to pay the value of the meat at its minimum valuation. They don't need to pay full value because they would never have eaten it had they known that they need to pay for it. Rashi says it's 2/3 of the actual valuation. Now, the third halacha, which we're not sure which one is going on, is if he left them property, that is, if they inherited land, from the father, then they have to pay. So the Gemara says that could be going back on the first halacha, where we said that they're not responsible for the eintzin for a borrowed cow that the father borrowed. And we're saying that if there's property, they are responsible for the eintzin. That would mean that Rava is saying here that the property is meshubed to pay back the oinsin. It's meshubed to pay back the cow, which means that when somebody borrows a cow, his property immediately becomes meshubed for it, and he's responsible for any oinsin that happened later from that moment. Therefore, if it onus happens after he dies, his property is already meshubed because his property is meshubed to it before it ever happens at the time of borrowing. As the Gemara is going to show, that is a halacha that Rav Papa says later. Now, if it's going on the second halacha, then it's disagreeing with that, and it's saying that no, even if the father left property, the property is not meshubed to pay for the einzin, because the chiyuv for the einzin only happens when the einus happens, not when the borrowing happens, and at that time the father's just already gone, and therefore his property is not meshubed to it. Now, what would the pshat be if it was on the second half? It would be on the second halacha. It would be saying that if they thought it was the father's and they shechted it, and he left them property, then they were mazik b'yadayim, then their father's property is meshubed to pay for that, to return it, and then they need to pay the full value. Okay, so we have this question then, what did Rava mean when he said the third halacha? And it's based on the issue of, is a person chayav to pay for einzin that happens on something that he's watching from the time that he borrows it or from the time that the einus happens? Something more brings in Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says that if somebody steals a cow and then he shechts it on Shabbos, so he's chayav for the theft, because even though he shechted it on Shabbos, his chiyuv for the stolen cow comes before. It comes when he stole it. And the Isser Shabbos happens later. It's two different things. There's no kamei b'diramine. If, however, he borrowed the cow and then he shechted it on Shabbos, so now he's pater because it was borrowed and he wasn't chayav for einzin on the borrowing. He wasn't chayav for anything. And the Isser Shabbos is the moment at which he creates an Isser Geneva. When he shechts the cow, which he's not supposed to be, he just borrowed it, he's supposed to be taking care of it, and then he shechts it, that shechita is both mechayev him benafshay, and it would be mechayev him as a thief, but it can't, because the same action cannot be mechayev him two things, and therefore it's kamei b'diramine. Now, that is Rav Papa's halacha, and what we see from that is that Rav Papa holds that the chiyuv only happens later. It doesn't happen at the time of the borrowing, because if that would be true, then he would be chayav to pay for it from the time of the borrowing, when he ultimately shechts it later, and therefore it wouldn't be kamei b'diramine. So he holds it only happens later. So if you, depending which version of Rav you hold like, is whether Rav agrees with this or not. Okay, the Gemara brings another brisa on the subject of inherited stolen property, and this will take us into the sugya of taking children to court. And then we'll bring a story related to that. So we'll bring the brisa. Brisa is one we've seen before, a drasha on the pasuk of returning stolen objects. The pasuk says, "V'heshavas gzela asher gazal." You should return the stolen object which he stole. Repetitive phrase asher gazal. What's that for? That teaches that you only have to return it if it is in the state in which you stole. The object itself that you stole is still around. If it is gone, you don't need to pay for it anymore. It's obviously can't refer to the thief himself, because for sure he needs to pay for it. It's referring to his children. Those children who inherited the obligation to pay. Stole an object, they didn't steal it, so if the object is always not here, they don't need to pay for it. Now, says the brisa, if he left it as a Yerusha to them, so then whether they are children or they are adults, they are still obligated to pay. This is only referring to when we said that they're pater, that's if it's used up, if they ate it. If it's still around, they still need to pay. Sumcha says only adults have to pay. Ketanim don't have to pay. The Gemara will explain why. So the Gemara brings the story. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yirmiyah had a brother-in-law, his father-in-law's son, and the father-in-law had died, and the son wanted to claim the inheritance, the Yerusha. Rabbi Yirmiyah came to the house to take the property that he felt they had a right to, and the brother-in-law, the son of the father-in-law, who was a katan at the time, slammed the door in his face. So Rabbi Yirmiyah went to Rav Oven, and he said, "I want my Yerusha." And Rabbi Oven said, "No, it's his. He's allowed to close the door in his face. He's claiming his own." So the Rabbi Yirmiyah said, "I'm going to bring witnesses that I had chazaka on it. I had my rights to it. I'd already taken it while the father was alive still." So that Rabbi Oven answered, and he said, "You can't bring witnesses against Ketanim. You can't bring witnesses if the litigant is not there, and Ketanim can't be there, they're not a bar das themselves. It's considered to be as if they're not there, and therefore you can't bring a court case, can't bring testimony against children. So the Gemara says, why not? We had the brisa, which we said that whether they are children or Ketanim, whether they are children or adults, whether they are Ketanim or Gedalim, you can be mechayev them, as long as the stolen property is around still. And in this case, the stolen property is around, so I want to be mechayev them. Well, that Rabbi Yavin responded, what about Sumchas? Sumchas says that the children you can claim from. So you see that you can't take children to court. So, and then Rabbi Yirmiyah said, I understand, that's just Sumchas. Why are we ignoring everybody else just to go like Sumchas in order to make me lose my money? So the story continued until it ended up coming to Rabbi Avo. So Rabbi Avo said, didn't you all hear what Rabbi Yosef Bar Chama said, Rabbi Oishia, that he said that if a child grabs avodim and he goes into someone else's field and he says that they are mine, that means he either brings, this different versions here how you read this, he either brings avodim or he grabs avodim as a Yerusha, and he says they are mine. So you don't have to wait until he grows up to do a court case against him. You take them away from him right away. When he grows up, if he wants them back and he thinks he has proofs, then he can bring his proof then, and then we will discuss it. But you can take it away from him. So therefore, our psak here should be you can take it away from him as well. So that the Gemara says it's not comparable. There, the child clearly grabbed it. He was not the muhsik. He did not have possession, and he went and grabbed the thing. So we take it away from him, and we say, listen, we're settling it the way things were before anybody started grabbing. And then when you want to bring a case, you're old enough to go to the court, then you can go to court. Here in our case, he had it in his property. It was in the father's house, and he had the chazaka. So he's just locking the door to keep Rabbi Yirmiyah out. You can't say that you take it away from him and then force him later to go to court. The Gemara now goes into the sugya of accepting witnesses without the litigant being there. Can you accept the testimony of one if the person that you're suing is not there or not? The Gemara says it is a machlekes. Rav Ashi said, name of Rab Shapsoi, you can accept witnesses if the Baldin is not there. The Gemara says Rav Yechanan sniffed at that. He says he can accept witnesses if the Baldin is not there. Now Rav Yossi Bar Chanina was makabel from him. That the answer is that the situation in which you are allowed to be makabel witnesses is if the Baldin is sick, or the witnesses are sick and they are about to die, or they want to travel to Medina Sayyam, and we sent to the litigant to come and he's refusing to come. Figures he's going to run out the clock here and the proof will disappear. So then we say, listen, the witnesses are here, we're going to lose them, you're refusing to come, therefore we'll accept them even if you're not here. Now, it says over here, the name of Shmuel, you can accept witnesses if the Baldin is not there. Mar Okva said that it was explained to me, the name of Shmuel, they were talking about where they already started the case. And then he refused to come. They sent him a message to come, and he refused to come. But if they didn't start the case yet, then they can't force him to come here, because he could say, I want to go to the Bez Nagadol in Yerushalayim. I don't want to be heard in this court here. So Gemara says, if that's true, so then even if they started the case, let him say, we want to go to the Bez Nagadol in Yerushalayim. So Ravina answers, he can only say he wants to go if he actually has a letter from the Bez Nagadol in Yerushalayim and he wants to go there. That's the situation in which he can. Okay, now the Gemara speaks about something similar. Can you establish that a shtar is not forged if the borrower is not there? So let's say you have a borrower and a lender, and the borrower wants to collect with it, and he wants to bring proof that it's valid, and the witnesses are going to be leaving, or he will lose the ability to prove that the signatures aren't forged sometime in the future. He wants to establish it now. So you can bring witnesses who will testify to the validity of the signatures, even though the borrower is not there, even though the Baldin is not there, and the Dayanim will sit down and write a shtar that they have established proof that this is a valid shtar and it's not forged. Now, Rav Yechon says you cannot do that. You cannot be mekayim the shtar if the witnesses are not there. Rav Shesha said to Rav Yossi Bar Avo, I'll explain to Rav Yechon's reasoning. The Torah said, "V'huad b'volov." If you want to make an animal into a muad, the owner has to be there. He has to be able to say whatever claims he can. And you therefore have to allow the litigant to be there. Any move you want to make, you have to allow the litigant to be there to contest that action. Now what's the halachas? It says, Rava, you are allowed to be mekayim nishtar even if the Baldin is not there. Not only that, even if the Baldin is there and he's standing and screaming, you don't have to listen to him. Now, if he says, give me some time, I have witnesses, I'm going to go bring them, and I'm going to prove that this star is forged, then we do give him that time. If he comes, he comes. He doesn't come, then we'll wait for him up to 1 week. We'll wait for a bahaba, Monday, Thursday, Monday. And if he doesn't come, at that point, we will write a psicho, which is a star of excommunication for having not paid the loan, which we already established that he owes. Now, how long do we wait? So the Gemara says there's a 90-day waiting period before you actually take the property away. The first 30 days, we don't take the property away from him because we'll say maybe he's trying to get the money. He's trying to push us off, and he's trying to get the money to go to pay it off. The middle set of 30 days, we also don't take his property away from him because we say maybe he wasn't able to get the money, and he wasn't able to borrow the money or to raise the money, and he wants to try to sell his property. So now he's working on selling his property, give him a chance to sell his things so that he can pay it off. In the last 30 days, we also don't take his property away because we'll say maybe he found someone to buy the property, but the buyer doesn't have the money. So the buyer's trying to raise the money. So up to 90 days, we'll give him to be able to get the money. If he doesn't manage to do that, then we'll write a shtar adrechasa on his property. Shtar adrechasa is a document that gives the lender the right to go repossess his property as payment for what he's owed. Now, we might add some more conditions here. This is only if the borrower says, I'm coming to pay, or I'm coming to discuss it. But if he ignores and he says, I'm not coming, he's not participating in the case, then we write a shtar adrechasa right away. He's refusing to participate, we'll take the property away. Another condition is only if we're talking about a loan. If it's a pikadon, the actual object is there, we write it right away. Now, also, we only write about collecting land. We don't write about collecting metaltalin, because if it's metaltalin, it's a movable object, then the person that we're awarding it to, the supposed lender, may use it up, destroy it, and then if the borrower actually brings, or the watcher actually brings witnesses, it'll be too late. Now, says the Gemara, what if the lender, who we want to allow him to collect, what if he has land? So first, the Gemara wants to say, if he has land, then even Talton we let him collect, because worst comes to worst, the borrower, if he can bring proof in the end, can collect that land from him. And then the Gemara says, no, we don't write an adrechasa for any metaltali, even if the claimer has land, because that land may go down in value and no longer be worth the amount that he may owe if the case ends up going against him at some point in the future. More halachas on the action of the court. The Gemara says as soon as you write a shtar adrechasa, which again entitles the claimant to go take property away, you have to notify the borrower that this shtar has been written and this property stands to be collected from him. It says that's only if he's close. If he's far away, you don't have to send someone all the way far to reach him. If, however, there are relatives who can bring the message to him, or there are caravans which travel back and forth from here to there, then you wait up to 12 months to send them the message until there's a caravan that's ready to go to send them the message. Mar quotes like Ravina, who waited for Mar'acha 12 months, which is a year, in order to be able to send the message through caravans all the way to Beichazoi, which is where the person was. And then the Gemara rejects this. The Gemara says, no, there is a special case because he was a very strong man, and if the adrechasa would have reached his hand, he would not have allowed anyone to take it away from him, and therefore we delayed it. But in a normal situation, you don't wait that long. You just wait until the messenger travels on Tuesday, and on Wednesday comes back, and then on Thursday you go back to court and you write the adrechasa. So you give him a day or two to go. The court always convened on Monday and on Thursday, so you give him a day. You issue the decision on Monday. He has Tuesday and Wednesday to go and to come, and then Thursday the court reconvenes and you carry it out. Now, says Ravina, the message that we sent to someone to tell him that he's being summoned and he refuses to come, we believe the messenger. He comes back and says he refused, we believe him. And the Gemara says they only believe him as far as putting him to actually write a shtar shamsa. That you're not going to do because that costs money. You have to pay the sefer, and we're not going to make people spend on that just because of the belief of the guy. Now, it says in further, you can send the message with a woman or with neighbors. And you can assume that they did the job and they told him the message that he's being summoned to the court. And based on that, you could write the shtar chirim. It says where that's only if he's not in the city in which the Beis is found. But if he is in the same city, we have to be afraid that maybe they didn't want to go give him the message. They assume that the sheikh of the Beis would do it since he's in the city. Another exception would be if his route home passes by the Beis. Again, the woman or the neighbors might not do the job because they would assume that he would pass by the Beis Din and get the message. Also, you can only assume that they brought him the message if they saw him the day that they heard it. However, if it took him more than a day to come home and for them to reach him, then it could be that they forgot by that point. Last halacha, and the Sugya Rava says someone who you wrote a shtar psicha, so that you wrote a shtar that he is in cherem because he didn't come, you don't tear it up until he actually comes. You don't accept his word just because he says I'm coming. That's not a reason to tear it up. He has to actually show up. And if you write a shtar sirav on somebody who refuses to accept the psak of the court and follow through, like if they say you need to pay and he doesn't pay, so you write a shtar sirav, a shtar of deloy tzais ladina, that he's not accepting, he's not listening to the court, that also you're not going to tear up until he actually pays. Not just because he says he's going to pay. And the Gemara rejects this. The Gemara says even though he doesn't actually pay, once he says I'm going to pay, actually you will tear up that shtar.